If you're recovering from surgery or have recently been injured or just feeling fragile and a little bit afraid of certain movements, you may have noticed that getting into and out of bed is something that's not that easy and that you need to figure out. So I'm going to talk about that today. And a little side note, it's not really worth waiting until you have an event like that to pay attention to this movement. It's the first thing you do in the morning and the last thing you do at night. So imagine the implications of improving, bringing awareness and a sense of support and grace to those movements, how that might affect your life in general. So I'm going to demonstrate here on my table. And basically, we'll pretend this is a bed that's off the ground, and that I first sit on the floor with my feet on the floor, and I sit on the bed before I go to lie in it. So again, if you're fragile, you're already slowing yourself down, but if not, you'll need to make sure that you slow down so that you can pay attention to how you're doing this transition, which is essentially a transition from being vertically supported with your head on top of your pelvis and the bed underneath you, to being horizontally supported with your head and your pelvis on the same plane and the bed underneath all of that. In that transition, there's a lot of load bearing onto the arms and potential strain into your back and your abdomen and everywhere really if you don't do it well. So the first step in improving this movement is to slow down and to look at its components. So a lot of people, if they want to get onto their back, they'll just turn their back to the bed and they'll brace with their arms like this and they'll lift their legs up. And if they're fragile, they'll learn very soon that that's not really going to be very comfortable. So a more efficient and safe and supported way to get down into your horizontal orientation is actually to turn yourself, the front of yourself, toward the bed, and to bring your two hands onto the bed. And if that means that you need to lift this hip off the ground, so be it, off the bed. Go ahead and do that. And just do this first little bit a few times, slowly, making sure that you can breathe easily and that you can reverse the movement back up to sitting without any big push or holding your breath or real change in what you're doing. It should feel reversible, the same thing in both directions. So the next step is to begin to slide your hands away from your pelvis. And that will start to present to you the pull of gravity on different parts of your trunk. And this is where it's very important to do a little practice. So we don't want to fall onto our next point of support. We want to actually be able to test a little bit this broader base that we're creating by sliding our hands away from us and then come back. And it's as if we're using our pelvis, this hip that's lifting and lowering, as a counterweight to the weight of our head, which is going out in space away from the pelvis. So the next step in the progression, as you slide your hands away, when you get to a point where you feel like to slide farther would be difficult, you want to just bend this elbow down. And you want to be looking at the bed. You want to be turned toward the bed. And once you get your elbow down, you can relax there. You can actually breathe here and rest your weight on your elbow, on your upper arm. And then you want to come back. So again, we're adding in new pieces of the puzzle and always going back to zero so that we train ourselves, not in the sense of training the muscles, but we're actually learning a pattern of movement in the mind, in the brain, and through the rest of yourself. So that this becomes something that doesn't trigger you to hold your breath or brace or stiffen. Because those things would actually get in the way of doing this well. So the next step, once your elbow is down and you're turned facing the table, is to lower your shoulder down very close to your hand. And to do that, you may need to lift your feet up onto the bed, and then you'll find that you almost spontaneously roll onto your back as a result of that rolling away from your side. So here we are. We've made it to the bed, to the horizontal position. And probably while you sleep, you're going to extend your legs. And then 8 hours passes, your alarm clock goes off, and it's time to get up. And just as a lot of people try to sort of back into bed, a lot of people try to lift up out of lying, right? So they start with their head, they push with their arms, and it's just a ton of strain on the neck here, on the abdomen, and it's causing my voice to get really tight and stiff, and I'm trembling a little bit inside. And if you are fragile, this is really not a good way to get up first thing. So what we want to do is essentially reverse what we did to come down. So we bring our knees to stand, and then we fold everything in, knees and elbows, to our side into a kind of fetal position. And then here, look, I have my elbow right where it needs to be. All I need to do is slip my feet off the edge of the bed and continue rolling to face the bed with my head and chest, and so that that weight comes onto my elbow and triggers me to push against the table to bring myself up. So I'll show the whole thing again, from sitting to placing the hands, to sliding and lowering the elbow, to lowering my shoulder and getting my feet up, and then rolling off my shoulder and onto my back. And then to come up, I roll everything back onto my side. I keep my gaze, my chest facing the bed. I push up onto my elbow, and then I slide back to sitting. So again, even if you don't have the need to go that slowly and you don't feel particularly fragile, consider your first movement first thing in the morning. If it had this amount of attention, this amount of ease, how that might change your mood and affect your day going forward. Not to mention your sleep at night. So play with that and let me know what you're thinking, and I'll see you next week.